translated into something that is meaningful for us here, directly meaningful. In general, Breishis is a very rich chumash.
Very what?
Rich, wealthy. Even though we're talking about the ovaries, we're talking about the pillars of the world, talking about unique individuals. Thank you. But at the same time, they are our fathers. They're the fathers of our nation. And we inherit from them both their qualities and also their teaching and their way of life. Just as anyone growing up in a family automatically takes on the nature of the family, so too our nation was conceived in that family. So even though we cannot emulate the level of the ovaries, but this is where our roots are, and this is inherent in our nature, it's inherent in our background, that to understand and to be able to relate to the values and the way of life of the ovaries. Yankov Avinu, in particular, in the fact that Yankov had a very difficult life, and most of his time, much of his time, was in Golus. Much of his accomplishments was accomplished in Golus. So we can very closely relate and inherit from Yankov how we should relate to our Golus. And what does Golus mean to us, and how we appreciate the whole process and our accomplishments. Just briefly, things which we all know, just to bring it in focus. Yankov had to run away from his brother Esau. When he ran away, he came from Yisro's house. So Yisro's house was a wealthy home. So he took all his needs with him. On the way, Eliphaz, Esau's eldest son, chased after Yankov. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Eliphaz chased after Yankov, because Esau sent him to go and chase after Yankov, and he commanded him that he should kill him. When Eliphaz caught up with Yankov, he couldn't do it, because he was very close with him. He grew up with him in the same home. He couldn't get himself to do it.
Did you teach him Torah or something like that? I mean, was there any bond between them? They were close?
They were very close. Later on there is in Tanakh about Eliphaz. So Eliphaz says to Yankov, I have this duty by my father that I have to do this. What should I do if I can't fulfill my father's command? So Yaakov said to him, take everything that I have. And there is an expression in the Gemara, ha'oni choshev kameis, that one who is totally impoverished, what?
I just heard we're learning that. We have learned that in Klal Gadol.
Yeah. Ha'oni choshev kameis. Ha'oni is considered like one who is lifeless, who's dead. So therefore, it is considered as if you actually accomplished your father's mission. So Yaakov give everything away to Eliphaz. And thus, this is what he says in today's parsha. He says, when I crossed the Yarden, all I had was my stick, my cane. I had absolutely nothing else. I didn't have a day's ration, a day's food supply. Didn't have anything. And then, of course, Yaakov worked very hard in the house of Lavan. You learned about this day and night, and Lavan tricked him and all that. Finally, he decided to leave. He left, and Lavan chased after him. Lavan threatened him that he was going to destroy him. All that you learned in the previous parsha. And now, when Yaakov is ready to meet with Esau, that's what Vayishlach starts with. He's finished with Lavan, and he's now ready to meet up with Esau and to deal with him. And he finds out that Esau hasn't changed over the 20 years. And he's coming to meet Yaakov with an army of 400 men. Yaakov becomes very concerned. And then he turns to Hashem. And in his tefillah he says, Kotointi mikol hachasodim mikol ha'emes. Kotointi means I'm small. I feel very small and undeserving. And I feel very humbled by all the kindness and the truth that you have bestowed on me, that you have given me. And yet, I ask you to save me from Esau and so forth. So now, if we look at Yaakov's, on this whole story, with a modern mind, with a mind, not a Torah mind. Yaakov is now talking to Hashem. Hashem knows everything that transpired. Not only Hashem knows everything, but Hashem was in charge the whole time alone. What would have been anyone but Yaakov, someone not from the Jewish approach, from the Jewish view? What would have been his approach and his expression to Hashem? What are you doing to me? Why are you chasing me around like that? I had some food with me, it was taken away from me. I labored 20 years and then was ready to be lost. Now you're sending an army of 400 men against me. Come on. Have some justice. Be fair. Esau is my brother. Look what's happening to him. He's got an army of 400 men. He's able to support an army. I'm a humble man. You're not being fair. Instead, what does Yaakov say? Yaakov said, I'm humbled. I'm indebted. I can't understand the great kindness with which you treat me. The exact opposite. Forget about Esau's 400 men. All that I can really fathom the fact that I have all this, that your blessings upon me. And therefore, when I come to you and ask you, you should save me from Esau, I don't know on what basis. I have no merits. I have no reason. I have no approach. But please, do me an extra favor. Be kind. Be merciful. The exact opposite of what one would think would be the natural reaction. Every word that Yankee was saying, he was saying it 100% honestly. He was not saying it because that's the right thing to say. He was saying it because this is the truth, and this is how he related to his whole situation. So, we want to understand what was influencing Yankov's thinking, that he should have viewed his life and all the goodness that the Vayishlach has given him as something beyond expectation, something beyond reason. After all, he did labor for 20 years. He worked 20 years day and night. And he was honest. And yet, all of this is a gift. This is nothing that I earned. So to understand this, clearly Yankov's mind and Esau's mind were entirely different. How Yankov viewed his life, how Esau viewed his life, are totally different. I'll come back to this question. I'll go a little further in the Pasha, in the 7. When Yankov meets Esau, and Esau breaks down, he runs to Yankov and he kisses him and he embraces him, and Yankov is saved for the moment. Just for the moment, Esau is still trying to get him to come with him or whatever it is. Then there is this discussion between Yankov and Esau. Esau says, what is all of this all these herds, this whole camp in Machane that I met? So Yankov said, I sent it all to you to appease you, to make sure that you're my friend, to make sure to tell you that I really want to be friendly with you. And I'm humble. So Esau says to him, I don't need it. I have a lot. Yesh li rov, I have a lot. So please, I don't need it. So Yankov says to him, no. I'm so touched by the fact that I was able to see you, and you forgave me, and you didn't come at me with anger, that you'll do me a favor if you take it. And then Yankov says, Yesh li koil, I have all. So here we have a contrast between Yankov and Esau. Esau says, I have a lot. Yankov says, I have all. Rashi says right there that Esau spoke with Gaiva I have a lot, much more than I need. Yankov said, I have all. All basically means I have all that I need. So Yankov spoke with humility, and Esau spoke with haughtiness. Now, if we look at these words of ourselves and say, and somebody says, I have a lot, and somebody says, I have everything, which is more, everything or a lot? Everything is a lot, is more. I have everything. Yet we say, Yankov said, I have everything, I have all, and Esau said, I have a lot. However, there is an insight contained there. Esau valued his possessions as worldly possessions. And therefore he said, I have a lot. Because the world, as we spoke on before, in the world there is no such thing as a person should be 100% satisfied. Because everything that one has, it's only an accumulation. There's an end to it. He doesn't perceive that there is true value to it. It's all measurable. It's measured by quantity. So as much as a person has, he has a lot, but he can have more. And what he has only limited value. It does not have the quality of permanence, of real. Yankee viewed his possessions from a totally different perspective. Yankee saw, to Yankee, everything that he had, whether it's a lot or a little, makes no difference. What he had was something that Hashem himself gave him, not something that he got. Hashem himself gave it to him. If Hashem gives him, so then that little which he has already is all. Because his possessions are supported by Hashem's gift. To Yankov, the biggest value of his possessions was not how it's measured in the world. The biggest value in his possessions is the fact that he got it directly from Hashem. We once discussed, here I mentioned to you, a discussion more than once that someone asked the Rabbi about the possibility. Very recently, I think I also mentioned it again. The possibility of a nuclear war. Nuclear war should destroy the world, and the Rebbe said that's not possible. Because the world is Hashem's creation. And it's the force, the strength, the basis upon which it is built, and that maintains it, is not measurable in worldly terms. We think that the world is limited. It's not limited. You can measure it, but that does not reflect its power to persist and exist. The reason that the world persists is because Hashem wants it, and therefore it's indestructible. It's a real presence. The presence of the world and the force, it's what's called a raison d'être, but its right of being is beyond world. It's indestructible. And this is what Yankee was saying to Esau. Esau says, I have a lot. But having a lot, what does that mean? They're all, you can just as you got it, you can lose it. It's all worldly. It's only on the surface. Yaakov says, I have all, because whatever I have is something which I got, which Hashem has decided I have. Once Hashem decided I have, this is basic. This is real. And this is what Yankee was saying when he turned to Hashem and he says, I'm humbled by all the kindness that you gave me. Because Yankee related, he looked at all the things that he had, not as something that he obtained in the worldly process. He viewed everything as something that Hashem gave him directly. And as such, everything that he had couldn't be measured by quantity. How much do you have? Because these are all permanent things. He had 11 sons at the time. Did he have 11 sons? No. He had a nation that's going to exist forever and ever. It wasn't 11 sons. The Mefarshim say there are different explanations in the Mefarshim. When Yankov divided his camp into two, I'm sure you learned this, right? He was interpreting the two. And he said, if one camp is going to be attacked, the other one will for sure be safe. So Mefarshim say, what made him so sure that they will be safe? So there are different explanations to this. And it's interesting that Ramban says that what Yankov had in mind was simply this. Everything that he had could be vulnerable. But his children, the Shvotim, that he knew that they are here to stay forever. He wasn't even worried about it. So he says, this for sure I'm going to have. This is indestructible. Because this is how Hashem is going to build this nation. So when Yankov turns around, it's true that he had all kinds of difficulties. And he suffered and so forth in Golos. But what is he coming with? He's coming with something which is beyond human measure. Something that is truly representative of Hashem's presence in the world. He created the Jewish nation. And therefore he says, I'm humbled. Now, I want to expand upon this a little bit and then bring it back to us. The whole, starting from Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yankov, the whole effort and dedication of the Yovos and thus of the Jewish nation was not to be successful and build a world. Our purpose is to to transform the world and to bring godliness into the world. Not world per se, but to transform and change the world. Avraham Avinu dedicated his whole life in teaching the Arabs and the whole world about God. This was his thing. And so Yitzchak in his way, and Yankov in his way. So what was Yankov out? What was he interested in? Not what he accomplished in the world. He was interested to know how much success did he have in terms of bringing godliness into the world. This is the real accomplishment. So when he had 11 sons, and then a 12th coming, now was he already established a Jewish nation that's going to be in God's nation in the world. This was his whole purpose in life. And this was the greatest thing, the greatest gift from the Meibush. And that's why he turned to Hashem and he said, Kotointi. How can any human being be granted such a gift that a human being should create such an edifice, such a permanent and everlasting edifice in the world? Now, I know. Even I'm drinking coffee. Okay. The important thing that I want to call attention to, and to have a clear view, is how this reflects itself to us. Something that we spoke about, certain aspects we spoke about over the years and months in the past. The difference between the life, we're all coming from different walks of life, from different backgrounds. The difference between what we have had in the outside world and what we have come here to gain, and the world that we are going to Mitzvah build based on the Torah that we're going to learn, is a difference between the world of Esav and the world of Yankov. Esav was born, as it says, you know what he's called Esav? He's called Esav because he was born all complete. He was done. He didn't have such a hard time in growing up and in finding his way in life. He went right out and he started, he had his sword, he had his bow and arrow, and he was at home. He went out into the field and he was at home wherever he went. He didn't need to learn, he didn't need to train himself. And he started building his life immediately. By this time, like I mentioned before, Esav had already an army of 400 men. He already had a nation. He already had a land. He was already fully established in the world. Yankov was still a humble man, traveling and from place to place. But all that Esav had no real permanent significance, had no real value in terms of building God's world. It was just personal experience. This is the world we're coming from. People jump from thing to thing. I like this, I like this. I'm enjoying it, I don't enjoy it. That's the whole criterion for whatever we do. There is an expression, there's a sikha from Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Rebbe. He came to America, and he began to expose, so to speak, American attitudes, to show the insignificant part of it, side of it. And in one sikha, the Friedrich Rebbe says that there's an expression in this country, how much is he worth? This expression is used even to this day. How much is he worth? And he says that it's very typical that a person's life, a person, should be measured, should be defined by how much money he possesses. That's his worth. We, from a Torah perspective, have a totally different view. We say that a person's worth is not measurable. Every moment of his life is a permanent moment. It's not measurable. The world we are coming from is all based on worldly measure. How successful is he? What success? Success is if he made well in his career. That's success. Now, we come to a Torah life, to a Torah world. And clearly, it has many restrictions, and clearly, it is a much more difficult path than in the world. I know, for instance, a young man, a doctor, who was a doctor before he became frum, and afterwards he became frum, became, Shabbos observant. And he says, you can't imagine how much more difficult it is to practice his medicine being a Shabbos observer than it was before. There's no comparison. It's extremely much more difficult. And the same thing applies to everything that a person does. It's everything that we do becomes a challenge. Just like Yankee, everything that he did was challenged. But we have to understand the value of anything that we accomplish is incomparable to what it would be, what it is outside of Torah. Anything outside of Torah is just a temporary, insignificant structure. Everything that one builds within the Torah structure is for real and permanent. Yankiv, I mentioned also last week, I think, Yankiv had 12 sons. All his 12 sons were bound up with Yankiv, followed in his way. Even Yosef, as we're going to see later on, Yosef, who lived alone from a very early age, from 17 years old, he was alone in Mitzrayim as a slave. And yet, he remained the same, he remained attached to Yankov. Because the essence of what Yankov gave his children, his sons, was a permanent quality. Was a real, they had the real godly presence in their mind and their heart. This was not something just what's called a family tradition. This was a real recognition of truth. And this does not come so easy. This requires a lot more work and a lot more effort. And sometimes there are difficulties in the way, in the path to accomplish it. But when one turns around after all the difficulties, and he looks around and he sees what happened as a result of his difficulties, he sees that what he has is totally incomparable to all the difficulties and all the effort that he put in. It's infinitely greater because it's permanent. Huh? Forever. Anything that a person does, a human being cannot make anything permanent. Everything that he does is going to change. But something that has permanence, that is forever, it means that Hashem Himself was partner with him in building it and in making it. This is the similar thing, even while we are still in yeshiva and we're learning. We spoke about this the other day. We're learning Torah. Others study science and mathematics. So when you study science and mathematics, you get to know science and mathematics. When you learn Torah, so the knowledge that you acquire, that is limited, because the amount of knowledge is limited to what you're able to acquire. But the effect of what you learned, and how it affects, how it changes the whole person, and the strength that it gives to the person is beyond limit. A person who approaches the world from a Torah perspective has the strength to withstand any pressure from the world. In other words, the strength that he has from his learning is not measurable, is not limited to the amount of knowledge that he has. This is what we saw and we continue to see it in the fact that Yidden are able to withstand any kind of nisoyen, any kind of challenge for their Yiddishkeit. They can, like we spoke the other day, Yidden were able to stand up to the communists, were able to stand up to any situation. not because of their great knowledge, but because of the power of their knowledge, the strength that they got from it. This strength is, as we said, this is a real strength that comes directly from the neshama, directly from God Himself. And this is what Yankiv was looking for. And this is why Yankiv was humbled. And he couldn't understand how he got all of that wealth. And this is the wealth that each one of us here gets on a daily basis. You say, what did I learn? I covered from here to here, from here to here. That's not how it's measured. It's measured by, what does it mean to you? What did you learn? Did you learn a piece of information, or you learned Hashem's Torah? If you learn a piece of information, yeah, it's measured from here to here. If you learn Hashem's Torah, that goes right into the neshama, into the person, and it becomes his flesh and blood, and becomes his power to carry him through the whole world, through life. So when we turn around after a year in yeshiva, or whatever period we have, and we turn around and we see, and this is something which everybody experiences, we look around and we meet up with our friends of a year ago, we start talking to them, and we see that they're in a different world than we are. They don't begin to understand what's going on. What did I learn? Totally different. They don't begin to understand what life is. You know, the whole concept of truth, the concept of true meaning and purpose in living. They're still on the surface. They're still floating around. That's when we see, where does this come from? This is not just from the amount of learning that I covered. This is because the Torah had seeped into our minds and heart, and became the strength of our own strength. This is happening, when a Baal Tshuva who comes to yeshiva and learns 1 year, and all of a sudden he doesn't recognize himself. It's not that he learned, he knows so much. He's just a different person. Because his whole life is changed from being a life based on worldly measure and worldly accomplishment, to a life being viewed from a truly godly perspective. Something which is not measurable, it's not limited. So, with this we'll conclude, and we will again wish each one of us here a big bracha and hatzlacha, that all the Torah that you learn should be absorbed in our bones, absorbed in our mind and heart, in our blood, and it should be the source of strength and confidence and clarity in giving us guidance and giving us strength to face the world, to face our life and bring us hatzlacha and success.
Amen.